Hello, hello. In these AI files, I've been wanting to pair with people to see how they use AI in their workflow. In this particular session, I paired with Claudio Ortolina, who showed me his application that he built for himself to manage his extensive CD collection. There's, I think, over 1,000 records. In it, he actually uses AI within the application, but also we talk about his workflow using Pi as a harness, which was great. It was a great intro for me because I've been really curious about it. So that was a huge portion of it. We go into so many other things that he's using with Pi. We also talked about having Elixir errors so they can feed back into the LLM itself. We talked about steering LLMs and how he uses it at work versus personally in his project. So a whole bunch of stuff. Claudio, again, thank you for doing this with me, and I hope everybody enjoys it. Claudio, thanks for joining me. Thanks for doing this, man. I really appreciate it. Do you want to introduce yourself quickly?
Yeah, so Claudio Ortolina, I've been part of the Elixir community from very early on. I used to do a bit more speaking at conferences, a bit less now. I had a career, I went into management, and then now I'm back on the product building side, on the engineering side. I think I think one thing I like to say is that if anyone is is in and around London in the UK, we organize the meetup, the Elixir meetup there, and it's really nice. It's still in person. We try to keep it very lively, and I think it's a good community. So feel free to give me a shout if you're around, and then you wanna do something at the meetup and all of that. We try to do once a month. I think that's my my main sort of thing that I want to say to the community is that one.
I love that. I love that. That's great. I wish we still had the in-person meetups for Elixir. The last time I actually went in person was still when I lived in Boston. I live in Atlanta now, and we had an online one. I don't know if it's still happening, but so cool that y'all still do that. That's such a good. It's so good. Honestly, it's really really good. So.
It's fun. It's difficult to keep it going because online covers quite a lot of what people are interested into, and so you end up basically going there really just to meet the people most of the times. I mean, yeah, you do talks, maybe you come up with some activity, but really is the meeting people side of things that keeps it interesting. So yeah, no, I definitely recommend trying to revive them wherever there's a possibility because it's really fun.
Nice, awesome. Well, thanks, Claudio. And do you wanna? Yeah.
I'll share my screen.
What you're working on?
Yeah, sure. All right, so how is it? Did it come up?
Yep, I can see it.
Yeah, okay.
Looks good.
All right.
So, Holy Land?
Yeah. I didn't ask you, but yeah, that's what we're looking at essentially. This is my it's my project. I'm the only user, and I built it for myself. So what you're looking at is just a live view application that I use to manage a record collection. I'm one of those people that buys records, physical records.
Love it.
And it got to the point where I needed a way to basically not just organize them, but when it becomes a passion and it spans multiple years, you start to really get into it from the point of view of interest, not necessarily the monetary side of things or buying and selling, which is a completely different side of the hobby. And so I started building this thing. This is a year and a half ago. So as we we're looking at things now through the lens of the LLM assisted development. This is sort of 70-80% hand built, and then in the last few months I started incorporating some basically LLM assisted developments through at least 2-3 different tools, and now I think I'm settling on something that I can show you in a bit. It's not particularly complex. It's because it's essentially it's a beefy database, but it integrates with a few 3-4 different APIs. It does something. It sort of gives me extra information about what's in the collection. It gives me stats and all of that. So there's a bit of pretty much everything that you would find in a web application. Now, it's self-hosted, which means it's running on a VPS, but it's fairly simple. It uses an SQLite database, so there's not much complication. Again, single user, so you just wanna. I think it just makes things easier, and but that means that basically I have sort of like 100% control over every little piece, and it uses I guess by choice, I would say at this point I'm trying to basically keep it working completely with community packages, like open source things. There's very little that is sort of like going with hosted services, and I'm mentioning that because it will be useful, I think, for something that we can look at. So in general, apart from like you've got like a classic sort of like the usual suspects that you have in a lot of Excel applications. Like, as I'm the user and the developer, I don't need to sort of like separate things too much. Everything is accessible from the same place. But you have a dashboard. There's O-band running for some background jobs on SQLite, not on the Postgres version, which is still very capable. And a self-hosted error tracker, which is this is a community package.
That project, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. It took me a second to realize that you have your application, and in the application you have that. I was like, it just didn't click for me for a second. You have the live dashboard, you have the error, like all the links are there because, like you said, it's a single user app, so you have your open dashboard there. That's cool. I love that. Okay.
I think it's different because when you build it for yourself, I think you can just sort of like, it's not necessarily shortcuts, but like for me it makes sense to sort of like go into a maintenance page and I have a mixture of things that you would give to a user, but also things that you would need for supporting basically operations, and they're very simple things. And I think that's the beauty, I think, of the stack is that it's very easy, irrespective of LLM or not. You just keep adding these affordances like as you go through building it. The rest is just very, it's I wouldn't say it's very predictable, but I like to think it is because it has to be very easy to use for me. A couple of maybe like interesting things. This is sort of like incorporating or useful introduction of AI things, but some when you start to have like a lot of records, you start to basically apart from that you forget what you have, which is I guess is a first world problem. But second, it becomes interesting to ask questions that you don't necessarily can answer by slicing the data up front, as in, what kind of genre, what kind of, you just don't know. And so one thing which I found myself like wanting to do, which proved to be interesting, is that I started integrating basically just a chat that essentially gets some representation of the entire collection, and then I can ask questions about it. And it tells me things that I don't know. Like, for example, I've got a small child who's got a small daughter, and I sort of like made a mental note to play more records with female vocalists, because she likes to sing and then she likes to listen to them. But I don't remember which ones are they that are there are female vocalists. Sometimes I remember only after I see the record, and so I just I asked that question, and then I think it's with some level of success. Most of the times it works, but I find that the LLM tries to be too clever in the reply. It's very difficult to control the level of just tell me what I want to know, and so on. So you get some of these things. So these things are sort of like where I'm trying to experiment a bit, which I think it's correlated, I think, with the way you approach the development of it through the LLM, because I think you keep trying to steer it in the right direction, right? It's the same problem, just from a different point of view.
Yeah. So these chats you created, so obviously you've created this whole UI and everything, of course, but
Yeah,
the chat, when you chat with it, how are you sending that and sending
yeah,
it to
yeah. So
like a LLM that you have
yeah.
running somewhere? Or?
I mean, this, but for I want to go eventually down the path of running that part on my own infrastructure somewhere. I haven't gotten around to that yet. So right now, this is hitting OpenAI purely because it's it has basically the web search tool with it, which is the useful thing because you want to go out for the information you want to look for. It's not guaranteed that you get up-to-date information about records and bands because of the way it's been indexed like whatever months ago. If you have a record that came out after, it will happily hallucinate information about it. This is I've seen it multiple times. But if you ground it with a web search, it tends to be a little bit more accurate. What it does for the time being, which is it's not particularly clever, but it works for the size of the data, is that it takes the entirety of the list of records and basically builds the equivalent of a CSV and puts it in the first message. And it ends up being...
So that's how you're feeding...
Yeah.
You're feeding that as context to OpenAI.
Yeah.
You're saying, like, these are all the records I have available. Okay.
I think it's hold on, where is it? This is where I have to remember sometimes stuff and I don't, hold on, summary maybe. Summary collections, there you go. So he ends up basically looking at everything. Say again?
Yeah, could you bump the font just a smidge? I know it shows hard on videos, but it's also...
Yeah, no, it's fine. Let me know when it's enough. Is that okay?
Give it one more?
One more?
Yeah, that's perfect. I like it. Thank you.
So
appreciate it.
So what you end up doing is basically you end up taking the entire database and just do some deduplication and do some initial sort of like massaging of the data, but it ends up putting it there in the first message, and that becomes context for the rest of the conversation. You basically keep shipping back the entire thing, which is working, but it's not. I mean, it depends how much money I have in the bank account. If it's gonna work until I buy basically double the amount of these records. That's the thing. So
the limit.
Because it becomes a cost concern, as in you take the endpoint you need from, I think I forgot which model is it, but I think it's not, you don't need the latest model that you don't need GPT 5.5 for this. You can go a couple of models back, but it has a limit in the context window, and I think it's 30,000 tokens, and now I'm sort of like around 25,000 just with that data. So there are ways around that. There are different. This is actually an item in the backlog where you can basically stash that context as a file there, and then you reference to it, and so the messages become much smaller when you ask the question, but then you have the problem of keeping that in sync reasonably well. I mean, maybe not up to the. So there's there's some things there. And so in terms of the way it's all set up, because I guess like we want to dive into it, the making on this thing, I guess there's a couple of things that, if that's okay, we can just go into that.
Yeah, for sure. That'd be great. I am curious. Yeah. Please.
So
and I'll definitely ask questions as we go. I like this.
So hold on, because I got I'll have to shrink you a bit because it's on front of the terminal, so I'll just put you on the side here. You're small enough that I can see you in the corner, but please shout if I miss you.
Yeah, I don't know how it. Yeah, I don't know how it shows, but please feel free to like minimize me or something.
Okay.
And all this stuff, like when you said you started the application by hand, right? This before like LLM stuff.
Yeah.
And then you said in the last few months you've been doing more LLM assisted. Like what How much of this, or what's your workflow like?
So I guess it depends on how. It's an interesting question. It depends on how big is the change I want to make. If it's a small change, a lot of times I'll do it by hand. If I have a small bug fix that I already know what needs to happen, I'll do it by hand most of the times. If it's something that I need to basically think about and spec a bit and just like shape a bit, I do it through the LLM for the simple reason that it gives me a sounding board. But I try to be very I try to do a parallel sort of like investigation without it as it does it, as I make up a direction in my head, like before reading what the LLM does, because they're very convincing. No matter which one you use, they're very convincing in their in the arguments, and it's very easy to just lean into it. And the other thing is, because it's I don't have a fixed rule where I have to sort of like each piece of work has to be tracked. I use a backlog, but I use it mostly not to forget things that I want to maybe work on. But I'm not very religious about it, because I don't need to be. I think I'm more religious about commits and the history of after the fact rather than beforehand. So the way I went through different stages, I started using Claude. I still use Claude for the day job, but I think I don't particularly like the fact. I think in general, both Claude and Codex and the other ones, I think they're very prescriptive about the workflow. Like they come with a plan mode that is there. You might not want to use it, but it's there. They give you a task structure that you might not want to use. They give you sub agents you don't need that sometimes. So I got a little bit sort of like put off by these things, because sometimes it would just take ages to do something that is very simple. Like you wait half an hour for something that is a code change in a couple of tests, just because they keep spawning stuff. And I started to look into.
Interesting. Okay.
I think that was I got frustrated. I mean, the level of quality, I think all of them do a very good job as a baseline. I mean, you could argue about that, but when it comes to, I think, web applications, I mean, a lot of times it's not rocket science. Certainly not in this application. Where it gets tricky is the user experience, I think. Like, make it feel right, so I get that. At that part, I try to control it directly as much as I can. So the rest is very. I think the quality is good enough. So I wanted to have something where I could shape the tool a bit better. And then coincidentally I came across Pi as a harness. And so I tried to use that. And it's very interesting because it's very bare bones by default. You got nothing. I don't know if you tried to use it. Have you?
I haven't. I know someone else who uses Pi, but I only know in passing. So I'm very interested. Like how you're saying it's bare bones. Like
Yes.
Pi is bare bones relative to like Claude Code or something else.
Yeah. So basically, it comes with like when you use it, it comes with I think 8 basic tools, which are read, write, edit, that kind of like bash and I forgot what, but they're basically the basic tools that make up an agent effectively. And then you plug whatever LLM you wanna use with them, provided that you have to figure out if there's API keys or if it's I think with Claude, when I sort of like tried to use it with Claude, there was a problem of terms of service that you wouldn't work with your subscriptions because it's a different harness. So I tried out of curiosity. I think that they're giving you an allowance now for that. I think $100 a month for.
I don't.
I don't know. I got an email
That
this
message
morning.
was super confusing that they recently sent. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think that's. I think that I don't fully understand that message, but yeah, that actually pushed me to use to test the OpenAI models a little bit more again.
Yeah.
So but yeah, sorry, go ahead. So
No,
it
it's
sounds like
fine.
you went
I think
similar
it's part
concept.
of the problem, right? Like it's like you get you're conceptually. I feel like we're delegating so much agency to these tools, but they can sort of like do whatever they want because it's a company, right? So while this like Pi is an open source harness, is it has a lot of Lisp-like qualities in the sense that you run it, but you can modify the runtime and reload it. Everything about it can be modified, and so you get that level of control, which it could be a lot of yak shaving, but you have to sort of keep a discipline. I started out of curiosity because I wanted to try DeepSeek as a model. Like version 4 came out, it's like incredibly cheap. For what I'm building, and I think you just get I think you have to do that consideration for yourself. I don't have a concern about this code base or the data in this database to basically go to Chinese servers. I think in the same way one could be concerned about data going to American servers and so on. I think it's at that time in our sort of like development professional life where people are more sensitive about where the data is. So in this case, like for non-work stuff that I can take that responsibility, I'm okay with that. Plus, I don't think you'll ever meet a person in their life that has a record collection that doesn't want to talk about it. So now they know about the records I have.
You want that to be out there.
Exactly. So it's is that. But I like the way it is. I think it's a good. It works well enough for what it needs to do, and I think it's comparable to a lot of the self-hosted options, which I think that's where I want to end up. So you get essentially an entry point in with that level of, I think, quality and accuracy, which is not gonna be like a frontier model. It's not gonna be as good as GPT or I think Opus. I don't know about 4.7, but certainly 4.6 was particularly good at some of the things that I was using with it. But I'm okay with that because of the complexity that it's dealing with. I think it's just something that you have to make your own assessment about. So putting the two things together, you get. I mean, it tells you when it boots what it's got, and a lot of, I think 90% of this stuff is project specific. There's not much in it that comes with, because you can install packages, you can add plugins. I haven't done much of that because I didn't need to. So I started adding only the things that I needed to it. And the interesting thing is that it's not just basically essentially a prompt with replies, but it has built-in tools and APIs to build your tools on top of those primitives like widgets and things like that. And so what you can do with it, which I think is much more interesting, is that you build a development environment where you happen to have an LLM that is embedded into it. And there's a few things that you can do with it where you can absolutely just work without even calling the LLM. Like for example, I mean, you've seen before there's errors here. Sorry.
Yeah, the error tracker.
Yeah, error tracker. Error tracker by default as a package doesn't give you access to the errors through an API. But I added that so that then I can ask the harness to fetch the errors that are in the application, and it knows what.
I love that. Is that like a custom MCP kind of thing? Then?
No, it's
just an AP.
No, it's so you extend Pi with node packages, as in you write extensions in TypeScript, and you can which is I'll show you this one, and it basically just this is Pi can write itself, because when you ask it to write something, it reads its own documentation, and it basically creates extensions, and then you just reload them when it's built. And so what it does is it ends up pinging an endpoint from the application where I return the errors, and there's a couple of extra routes that are just to let me see. Let me get them here. There you go. So it's just they're just extra routes to mute, unmute, resolve and unresolve errors. And so
that's so cool. Okay.
But it's useful because at that point you have the information of what's, for example, going wrong directly in a place where you might try to fix it. And because the extension mechanism it gives you basically a few entry points. You can build it as a tool, and then the LLM can use a tool, or you can build it as a UI, and then it's for you, the person that wants to basically look at this. So now if I want to see, I don't know, I got this error that is muted, which I think it was something they could actually look at, but we can actually look into that now. So there's a stack trace for this.
Nice.
And it's just the same thing that is here. Really. The information is already in the error database, right. And then, but you just put it here, and then you can work with it. Actually, this is not the one that I wanted to look at, but this one I think is a good one, because it tells you like I got because it's a classic SQLite problem, but now I can read it, and it's sort of okay. I can read it, but also I can say, you know what, I just want to look into it through the LLM and see if there's something we can do. So I can basically just say copy the ID, which is the error ID, and say like look into. Sorry, and then it will start doing it, and it knows how to fetch it because it has exactly the same capability that I have. It's inside in the same file. It calls exactly the same API, so you have one piece of code that you can audit for security and all of that, because obviously this ends up eating potentially sensitive information, so you make your own assessment about that. But it's trying to figure that one out now. Now I kind of have a suspicion about what the problem is, but it's gonna look at it with his own thinking. And the thing which I like is that you don't see this anymore in the other ones, but DeepSeek lets you see the thinking. So you can.
Interesting. I feel like I see some of the thinking in I'm trying to think which ones show you stuff. GPT maybe shows you, but
I don't know.
This is cool. Sorry for interrupting. This is cool because this is basically an MCP server. I've done this with like Sentry, right, or some at work, and like we can pull in the error, you can like inspect it or whatever. And I've also actually, before we used the MCP, I built like a little script that would, you provide a Sentry API key or whatever, and it would just do this kind of the similar thing. But I love this because you're saying Pi helped you build this up on itself, right? Basically,
and because I asked it to do it
or whatever. You added the endpoints, right? You added the endpoints to your Phoenix app because you're using Error Tracker, which is also hosted locally, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's you can do the full circle.
Yeah, and the main difference with I think this is where because if you look into Pi, it's one of the big opinionated pieces where the author of the harness it doesn't believe into MCP at all. In fact, it doesn't ship by default with MCP. You have to use it as if you want it, you put it as a plugin. For the reason that it ends up eating a lot of context primarily. But I think what's interesting about this is that it doesn't. None of this basically ends up being like the capability does not get into the context because it's part of the built-in tool. So it only knows that this exists, but the LLM only knows that the tool exists, but it doesn't know that there's it just knows that there's a grammar to it, I guess, a set of arguments, but it doesn't have to go and read documentation or ask the MCP what are the capabilities and so on. It's in the client, which tends to be, I guess, more efficient context-wise or token-wise. Plus, I think it's very easy to write TypeScript, as in the LLM knows how to read TypeScript quite well. So it doesn't get
right. So
like I haven't found it difficult to basically just figure out what to do well enough, and also it tends to be, I don't know if it's me telling it or not. I told it a couple of times, but it's very conservative dependency wise, which is what you want. So I think you're not gonna get. It can pull in dependencies, but it's not gonna go overboard. So in the meantime,
that's interesting. Yeah, no, I like it. Yeah, sorry, and so I like. Yeah, I mean, when I say MCP, like, yeah, it's true. I mean, not everything needs to be an MCP, or most things can just like a CLI tool, and you're fine with it, and you don't even need anything more than that. But this is like, so these are pipe plugins. Is that the right terminology?
You could call them packages, but when you build it yourself, it ends up being an extension. You have to drop it into this Pi extensions folder, and then they get picked up. And I just did I just basically built the ones that I wanted, like the same, like, this is the one you saw for errors, one that pulls production logs, and just lets me see that. Another one which is because it's an SQL database, it gets backed up automatically via Lightstream. Like it takes it and it streams a backup to an S3 bucket, and I just wrote a thing where I can just see the contents of the bucket, so that I don't have to basically rely on anything else. And then this one, which I think is probably the most important one, is the harness doesn't come with any safeguarding about reading files or anything like that. So if you have a file with secrets, it might read that, and there's nothing that stops it. There's no built-in thing. So either you run it in a sandbox, which I would like to at some point, but otherwise I just asked it to build an extension that essentially lets me basically block it from reading any file that I don't want it to read, but also blocking bash commands that read that file. And so that becomes interesting, because you don't have that. I just could tell you, like, okay, bash command, but how about you pull in an AST parser to parse a bash command, so you can find where it's trying to read it in a subcommand or in all sorts of other. And it did it. It did it there. It did the work. We looked at dependencies. Because you don't want to do this. The less dependency you have in a critical path like this, security related, the better it is. So we just audited dependencies and all of that. It took like an hour, but then he ends up doing that, and then you have tests that are runnable, and you just have all of the tests that you want to have, and this runs on CI. Like the tests run on CI. You treat it like it's a proper application, and you just have that visibility. So I like that approach. I think if you were paranoid about it, you would probably build your own thing at some point, and I think that would probably be the best scenario. I think if it reminds me a lot when I use Vim with the distribution now, but when you write your own configuration, like you get to that point because you want to be there, maybe more of an Emacs kind of thing, because it's much more powerful, but it feels like that.
This is so interesting. Do you know, so I've used stuff like this, but I'm trying, like the prevention of like executing certain commands or stuff like that. With Pi, is this it up to the LLM to obey these commands? But you have tests here, or is this at a different layer?
The harness obeys the commands. So the extension is deterministic, because the LLM, for example, if I ask the LLM now, read a file that has all of my environment variables into it, the LLM would try. So there is no safeguarding at the LLM level that prevents it to doing that, because the safeguarding cannot work 100% of the time. And so when so what it does is that it gets to here when it basically says py on tool call. Then if the tool call is one of the events, one of the tool calls that you think they should be basically, I guess, allow listed, as in like you want to examine them, then this hook gets invoked, and then it goes through the deterministic path. There is this works 100% of the time for the same tool call. Now you might, Bash particularly is complicated, so there might be an edge case of I don't know, redirection or malicious script that is able to circumvent it, because you can't just pass the AST of that command and figure out that it wants to read the file. Maybe it's done in a different way. So but that's a deterministic problem. It's not a problem that the LLM is accepting or not your restrictions. So it is as safe as it can be, provided that your defense mechanism is safe. But it cannot be 100%. It cannot be better than a sandbox where, for example, you don't provide the file at all. Maybe like you don't have that. For example, like there's other projects where they do that. They sort of like overlay file system on top of your actual files, and so when you actually try to read the file through a system call, they just block that. And I think that's fine. But after a certain extent, it's like I'm not even sure how much it matters after a certain extent, because if it can read my application code, as in like it can interact with the MCP server of the application, he has the access to the code base. So if he really wants to, he's just going to go around it and just say like, what does it look like in the application? So
right, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. Of course, right. It's like you can circumvent it, but I mean this. So just to make sure, like this is way better, and because you have things like you have horror stories of like, oh yeah, we had it in our agent's file, an instruction not to do something, right? Which is like that's like a suggestion to the LLM basically, because they can just ignore that. But this, I understand what you're saying. This is at the edge where it's actually calling the tool, and it's like a hook. It's like if you call it when it tries to call this tool, there's like it runs this deterministic program that we've written, and it's preventing it from doing that, which is a lot safer. And of course, like you said, there might be ways around it, but it's a categorically different type of safety. So yeah, I get that.
Like I think you could go down the path and say like, block commands is this one. If I add inside, I don't know, add a SSH, add anything that could, I could even block curl or anything like that. Then at some point you end up basically, okay, you're not going to be able to do specific things, but at the same time it's not going to be able to call the command that sort of like breaks completely your application. The other thing is, I think it's a side effect of self-hosted infrastructure. You have way less. I think. I'm using Coolify, which is very nice, but it doesn't have the same CLI capabilities that you have with all sorts of other, I think, SaaS options. Like if you deploy on fly, I think it will be able to do way more damage, because the CLI gives you the ability to do way more damage if it's misused. But like I think to figure out how to delete my database, I think you would need to figure out quite a lot. It would be able to, but it's less direct than I think other options. So I think you have to consider all of these things when you use an LLM. Because I think it's very easy to shoot yourself in the foot. The horror stories are very scary because I think there's not enough due diligence in that area first. Um, but yeah, so so in the meantime, I know this, chatting on the side, but he started doing his investigation. So the problem was that, like I looked at this before because I wanted to. I sort of like I had a question in my head that I'm happy that it will that's where we got to. So the bug is it's a very simple thing. Every night at 2 a.m. tries to write to the database, and it gets the database busy. Notification from SQLite. SQLite, if you've never used it, it has a single writer. You cannot do concurrent writes.
Right.
And so there's no way to change it. It's not that you can change it and all of that. It's a specific, like, there are forks, there are patches, but the standard one has that built in. And so what happens here, which is interesting, not necessarily the problem, but rather what is going to be the suggested solution, is that to get, I'll just show you the end result here. To get this Scrabble activity, if you have a certain age, as I have, you might have used Last.fm before streaming and all that. It was a way to, I still do, keep track of what you listen to. And so they talk about it as a Scrabble thing, and your audio player or whatever you use is Scrabble's information you listen to. When I listen to a record, I Scrabble it, as in, like, I post to Last.fm that I did that. But the way the entire thing works is that you post from different places to Last.fm, and Last.fm, if you want, gives you an API to pull that data if you want to keep it for whatever reason. So my Scrabble activity,
got it.
I pull it in my database, because that way I can enrich it, I can slice it the way I want, and so on. Because it's you basically cut through all of the metadata with SQL queries. It pulls every 5 minutes.
So this data. Sorry, this data. I just understood it. So that data is not something you're updating manually or something in your app. It's like you're doing it via, you said Last.fm, and then it's like it's actually pulling. You're pulling it via the API. Gotcha.
I think So if I say that you play, I don't know, if I play something through, I don't know, and whatever audio player that you stream or whatever it is, and then you can hook your account together, then they will do it for you. But when I put a record and I play the record, there's no way that any record player is able to do that. For all sorts of reasons, that's not going to work, because you don't have enough metadata for that specific record to be scrabbled, right? To be submitted to Last.fm. So what I personally do is that I basically, for every record that I have properly tracked, that I know the exact release, then I can get the track list and I can submit whatever I listen to. If I listen to the entire record, I'll click this button. If I listen only to some songs, I'll pick them and submit them. And this goes directly to Last.fm. And once it's there, Last.fm does a pass of data normalization, which I will air quote, because it's debatable how it gets normalized, in the sense that it's not particularly consistent, and in a lot of places it's outdated. The more niche is your record, the more it's just not good enough. So when I pull it back from the API, it comes back with all sorts of inconsistencies, missing metadata, and so on. So if I have if it's for a record that I have, I basically do a pass of data fix myself, and I look at some of the things I've got. There's a rule set that gets applied, and so what it means is that the reasonable way to do this, which has to do with also with the fact that you cannot just keep pinging that API, is that every 5 minutes I pull a batch of 200 songs, which tends to be enough, because you're never going to be able to listen to more than 200 songs in 5 minutes. It's just impossible. So it gives me a delta. Then I store whatever it is that changed in those 5 minutes, and then it will do it again in another 5 minutes. It's a sort of like a self-enqueuing job in O-Ban when the previous one finishes, and then when it finishes, it queues the next one. But
Got it. Okay.
so what happens is that but for performance reasons, also because it's SQLite, every night at 2 a.m. my time, it auto vacuums the database, which means that it basically ends up reclaiming a little bit of disk space, does a little bit of cleanup of data and all of that. This is not particularly important for this specific piece of data. It's for other things that are stored inside the database file. So he has to run, and it takes a few seconds to finish. In fact, it takes, you can see it here because it's now, Uban has this nice thing like cron jobs are, you can see them
oh, nice. Yeah. Haven't seen that.
So it takes a few seconds, right? And so what happens there is that if you try to do anything else while it's vacuuming, you will get a busy timeout, unless with the default timeout. Now, that's what it figured out here. There's a cron job collision at 2 a.m. because the occurrences of the error were all at around 2 a.m. And then he sees the static configuration of cron, which is in the application. He figures out that that's the problem. But that's where it gets interesting to me, is that I did this beforehand. I asked it exactly the same thing. He had the exact same error, and he suggested a completely different fix. And so that's where you get.
What was it last time?
What was it last time?
Out of curiosity.
So this one is telling me increase the busy timeout. You put it like a large value. Therefore, a write query will wait up to 30 seconds before timing it. Which I don't think I particularly like, because this is going to basically potentially mask other problems if you basically wait this much in production for waiting. So the other time he suggested the thing which was like the sensible thing to do, which is stagger the operations a bit more, which is an interesting thing, because what you could do, you can approach it different ways. You can say like, okay, I want to skip. I mean, it's 2 a.m. Most likely I'm not going to listen to music at that time, so I'm just going to not poll at that time. I can write some logic for that, or I can try to basically stagger the cron jobs a bit better. But this is exactly with the same prompt. He suggested a completely different thing, which to me, and I tried this on in other ones as well. Like, it's not just DeepSeek doing this, but it's intrinsically a property of the fact that it's the non-deterministic LLM that you're talking to. So once you know this, then you start to question all of the replies, really. Like, it's a solution, but it's not necessarily the best solution.
Right. It's not. Yeah, I mean, that's just the nature of their, right? Like you said, it's non-deterministic. It's part of their, next token kind of thing. And yeah, you can go different directions. Do you also know if there was any? You said it's the same prompt, same data. Yeah, I mean, this is what a great way to be able to have it's the same use case, right? Like, you're controlling all the inputs, and then you see two different, which is true. I mean, anytime you ask an LLM, the 2 times in a row, you can see different results, even if you ask like in a sequence.
So I think you basically, that's why a lot of people invest quite a lot in sort of like babysitting, like checkpoints, and do all of that. I think it's up to a certain extent. I understand it. I think what you're trying to do potentially is just to not a fool's errand, but I don't think you can completely constrain it in a way that you say, okay, I'm going to make it 100% predictable, or like, because I think you lose a bit of the potentially, or creativity is a strong word in this case, but I think you want a bit of that randomness. But I think it's more effective to leverage that randomness rather than trying to to restrict it.
To constrain it. Yeah. That's
because
interesting.
because it's just like, for example, I say, and I think this one, I mean, I'm not gonna change anything now, but I think it's it gives you, with a very, it's a very simple sort of like problem, but you can tell already there's completely different things. And so what if you start to ask it to do something more complicated than this? Then it can absolutely go in completely different directions, and you just have to accept that it can do that, or you really have to steer it consistently all the time. Like if I wanted to, I mean, we were chatting, I sort of didn't do it, but in like throughout sort of like the the output and tool calls, there is a space where you can queue a message to steer it halfway through. So you can tell it, like, I see you're getting yourself lost into this specific topic, come back to this, and it will do that. And that's very effective because it interprets the steering. It's a very high, very, very strong signal. Like it will stop doing whatever it's doing and just go back to whatever you tell it to do. Which is really good, because then you can steer the direction, but it also means that you have to be present. Like you can just like go off and do something else. And so if it's something that is important or architecturally very, I think, high stakes, I think you have to be present, at least in this situation. I'm sure that maybe, I don't know, maybe with a different model you can be a bit more hands off. But I find that for example, with DeepSeek, you have to be involved like that. Which I'm okay with, because that's how I want it to be from the point of view of the general approach. Like I still want to be in the driver's seat, so I'm okay to be in the driver's seat that way. But
yeah, that's interesting. Do you, is this, I know this is like a work a home. Do you at work also follow that approach? Like, are you, I don't know what I think you
work
mentioned
is
you use Claude at work.
It's different because it's a much larger application, and so I think you have to have more of a direction beforehand, because otherwise it will get lost. I mean, duplication, for example, is a big thing that you need to worry about, because there's no way to have the entirety of a map, the entirety code base, in a size that is compatible with a reasonable context window. I mean, now you got 1 million tokens with Opus 4.7, and but still, if you start to basically have to start with a lot of information up front, even with 1 million, it will start to drift relatively early. And so a lot of times it's just a matter of no luck, but if you ask, like, I want to do this, and there is a helper somewhere, it's a coin toss. You don't know if it's gonna find it or not, because maybe at that point it will walk down a path where it will get close to it and maybe find the reference to that function somewhere, or the grep pattern that it's going to use to find potentially this function is good enough, and then it finds the right name. But it's very difficult when the domain is extremely large. It's very difficult to find the right name to use. So you kind of have to invest in glossaries and things like that. You have to treat basically the LLM as a person that just started a job and wants to learn everything very quickly. So you give this package of documentation, which is technical debt at the end of the day, because you're going to have to maintain it. But it's very difficult to do that in a way that remains efficient, because beyond a certain size, I think. So then, there's other ways, but we haven't really invested into code search tools and things like that. I think at some point, people might try to do that. There's companies that are popping up now that's the main product. For what it works here for this size, my recommendation, which works 100% of the time, is have an architecture document that is in the agent file, and this works really well. It tells you, like, if you read this, you understand the application at the high level because it has all of it tells you what, it tells you the schemas. This is very, you look at it with the eyes of a person and you keep thinking, like, how are you going to keep all of that in sync with the code base? Well, the answer, I don't. I tell it to do this. I wrote basically a skill for that basically tell every so like once a week or something like that, I run it, and then it goes to the Git history, and then basically ends up updating this and a couple of other files. And this way, you have a very short version. Like this, what is it like? 450 lines.
Nice.
That explains to you how everything works. And so I think you have to invest a little bit in figuring out what's the best type of artifact that works, or approach that works for the size of the application. This is short enough, it's fine. But I wouldn't be able to do this for the application I have at work, because it's I don't know what is it. I forgot how big is it, but it's like a few thousand modules right now. This one is what? 200 modules.
A big difference there.
So it's not particularly complicated. Like you could look at it in an afternoon and you would probably figure out most of it.
But that's interesting. So you have a skill that you're using about weekly, that it's auto updating that documentation.
Yeah, so it does
some other files. Yeah.
So it's just the things that I one for dependencies and one for documentation. Because otherwise it's you don't remember about it, and at least I found it very difficult to have that reliably done at the point in time where you're committing a change, and then and when you commit the change, you have to make sure that you update the docs. That's hit and miss. It doesn't go off reliably. I can't really. I mean, I guess I could try to make that a deterministic check, like a form of a linter that says, if there's a new schema and this word doesn't appear in there. But I think I would invest more into that if other people were working on it. Then at that point, you really want to be more strict. But for me, I think it's enough for like once a week, or to just go through that, and it takes like 5 minutes to do. Like he runs in 5 minutes, he does it. It gives me, by the end, it tells me like this is all the things that I want to add to the documentation. I can review that, and it works out fine.
Yeah, for sure. I guess I had one last question. Just that you just touched on there. Do you have more linting verification, like any that kind of, like, what kind of tooling you use?
Yeah.
Whether it's more Credo checks or test coverage, like what are you using for helping you trust that the output is correct?
Yeah. So I think the main thing, which I this is a blog post I think a couple of months ago that was saying something along the lines of, and it's not that it was particularly scientifically researched, but it was saying the first 1,000 lines determine the outcome of whatever comes afterward, like the first. So on purpose, I went because I didn't want to get lazy, because it was the thing that you do in your spare time and all of that. So I just went full blown with what I think you should have in a production application. So I don't know if you use Misa. Misa's basically the tool that you use to manage
like ASDF.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Everything baked into one. I really like it. It's quite a is quite good. But so what I did was I wrote a bunch of basically, some of it is standard tooling, like mixed tests. I'm not using Dialyzer because I'm already running on 1.20, and I think it's fine. Like it just catches everything. I don't need it anymore. Specs are fine, but more for documentation at this point. So I find that covers well enough. But then I do a lot of like formatting is enforced, credo is enforced, dependency is enforced. In my sort of like thinking, maybe one day this could be something that I don't use myself. I started with translations from day one, and so that's enforced. Shell scripts are linted. Prettier runs for everything that is either JavaScript, TypeScript, or Markdown, because it's just easy to, once you have it, it's just, so all of these things they all get run. It's small, the application, and so when you do this, the mix test takes 10 seconds, so it runs before committing, and so basically all of this just happens anyway, whether I write it by hand or I write the LLM writes, and so it ends up just following the flow in the same way. There are instructions to say, run focus tests, use translations and all of that. Those things are written down in a few skills and in the agent file. But it's like, because I can't trust it to reliably follow it, then I just made it as something that runs no matter what, and then CI runs the same things. It's compared to, so without an element, sometimes adding these things takes you some amount of work, but I think with the LLM it's very easy to add like you just think about the problem and you can probably come up with it if it doesn't exist, in half an hour. And so I think it's very good to invest on that, even if it's a small project, because then it pays off. It's running tests we cover. I'm way beyond the threshold that I established, but it's not necessarily for me, because I would remember, okay, I build this thing, I want to add a test. But having those signals there tells the LLM that they have to do it. There's no way it does something now without checking the test or adding a test, and I don't have to tell it, because it's part of the process. And if it's word that it's I think we haven't looked into that, but there's for something that are where is it? For something that is particularly elaborate, there's a backlog. It's actually, this thing is it's called Backlog MD. It basically maintains a backlog from Markdown files in the repo, which I think is very good for one person. And it's so these are the pending stuff that I want to work on, all of this, they contain implementation plans, and the implementation plan is not. It basically goes through a review process, and so in the implementation plan you have to have all of these things written down, and if they're not applicable, you have to say they're not applicable. But for example, for me is interesting. For example, I'm paying out of my own pocket for this thing that I'm building, so I want to know if you're asking me to build something that is going to cost me money. And so if he says you know what, this thing you can use the OpenAI chat and all of that. When you do that, it will go off and try to give you a cost estimation of how much it's going to cost you to do that API call. And it's useful for me, but you have to tell it all of these things. So testing and all of that, it has to be written down. And so you just do a lot. I think you spend some time figuring out how you want it to work, because that's how you like to work, and then you basically write it down, and then it follows this.
Yeah, this is cool. This is a pie. I was looking at the file structure. It's a pie prompt,
yeah.
right? So you're using that prompt to create these backlog tasks, right?
So, for example, if I say this, like it will read this, and then it will tell me, okay, and then you just tell me like, right, tell me about this. It doesn't give you, like check boxes and things. Like it's just asking you, and then you write, and that's it. But then it will go off and do the implementation plan following this. And once it's done, it tends to look like, for example, let me just pick the ones that are ready, because then once the implementation plan is done, I label them so that I know what can be picked up. But for example, for this one basically, the implementation plan ends up getting like it does everything. It knows what it's gonna do, and it has the verification. It has the verification part of it. Maybe it's automatic. Part of it is, down to you as a user. So it's gonna tell you now go around and do this, or maybe it will try to open Chrome and do it, but it's incredibly slow. So I don't particularly like it. I think the browser.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just so I just do it, but it does this. It does all of this. It feels that, and then because it's an LLM, you cannot trust it to do it. Then once it's done, what it tells you at the end, it says like, now, once you've done doing this, offer to start a new session, so that I can review it. So at that point, I start a new session, empty the context, and in a fresh one, tell you now review the plan with the exact same criteria, like exactly identical. And every time, 100% of the time, you will find 4 or 5 things to fix. 100% of the time. There's no way it gets it right the first time. Which is fine. I just need to know that that's what's going to happen. And then once I do that pass and I read it, and sometimes depending on how complicated it is, you read it, more carefully than other times. But then once it's done that, then implementing, I don't know, this thing, which is very simple. This just means, like, this one is, all of those words are to say this thing. I have, these are sets, which basically arbitrary groups of records. I decide what's the criteria. I give them a name, I give them a description, I put the records I want. Think about like a playlist for records. I want to have a button that says empty it, like remove everything from the set. Like if you know the data model is the kind of thing that you write in your head in 10 seconds. Okay, I just need a button there. I need to have a handler, and the handler is gonna go like a delete all or whatever it is that you want. It writes all of that, like completely top to bottom. It ends up basically looking at it, and it tells you, but if you do that, then you need to do this, and maybe it thinks, okay, now you need a subscription, but this is how I'm gonna test it. It's gonna test it's a no op for an already empty one.
No.
Why?
Yeah, it makes sense, and the thing you talk about, like having a verification step, right? That's very common. I like that. You have the plan, you have another agent, fresh context. Sometimes it could be a different model. You sort of have it recheck the plan and do all the, and they always find something, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like the verification steps. I do often wonder, like, how do they can still hallucinate some things, maybe. I mean, the models are getting better, the harnesses are getting better, so maybe at some point we trust it fully, but
I think it's yeah. I think you still have to be there 100% of the time if you really care about what you're shipping. The other thing is, and I think this is a recommend to me is sort of like what I think is just came out of this system, which I didn't think about at first, but because the plan, the task, and everything is in the code base, then I can just go and basically use it if something else to check it. Like as in, okay, I think it's very complicated. I'm just gonna get a different model to look at it. But I don't have to pass around this information or copy and paste. They just read the same thing, even if it's like proprietary. For example, I think it's I don't want to pay extra if I have a subscription. I don't want to pay extra for you to read the file from Pi. If Claude wants, Opus to read the file, I'm just gonna use their application because I don't want to pay them extra money just for that. But if you leave the data segregated inside the sessions inside the harness, I think you're missing out because you don't control it anymore. So for the fact that there's no plan mode, it's an advantage because it forces me to put plans somewhere in a way that I can preserve or move or work with.
Yeah, you definitely want the what are they called? Like the output files, right?
Always.
Anyway, I'm forgetting the word, but like you
Yeah.
want those things so you can kind of keep passing them around or keep storing them and stuff like that. Which is it's a new thing, and like that even of itself is like a new thing in a team. Is like, should we be committing these plan files if we're gonna have like a longer running thing? I don't know. There's just like a lot of questions there of like, what do you commit into source code and what you don't and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, for example, like at work we don't, because part is you're supposed to basically have that sort of like described well enough in the issue tracker, and then the PR should contain the technical overview of what you're doing, but the plan itself is not, because it's not going to get reviewed by another person beforehand. I think that's you're reviewing it yourself. So I don't know if maybe there would be a merit to it to have it included, but it's not codified as a practice. But yeah, you're right. It's something that should be discussed more, I guess, in a team.
Yeah, I think some teams might be introducing plans, reviewing them to make it sort of like that's kind of what you're doing, reviewing now. And anyway, but that's sort of like a whole other layer. Claudio, let's. I think maybe that's a good stopping point. I feel like we've covered a lot. I appreciate it. There's so many. I'm loving Pi. Like to me, that this was my highlight has been Pi, and I want to go check it out because I've used OpenCode, and I've used Claude Code and Codex, and yeah, I think those three. In different scenarios and different styles or whatever. But I love that Pi is like you can tinker with it, right? You can write plugins for OpenCode, but I think they're TypeScript as well. I might be wrong on that, but Pi seems more the like very editable, easy to work with kind of thing, and I like that. That's really
I think if anything, I think it forces you to ask yourself the questions about the workflow that you want, and I think you're gonna get, if anything, a more responsible usage of the other ones. That's the main thing, because now I think you can see beyond the sort of like the marketing that all of these companies are doing about their harness. I think it forces you to think, okay, what does it really matter when I use it? What is it that I really care about? And then you can decide if it's if one of the, I don't know, if Claude does it well for you. I mean, sure, you can keep using that, but at least you're not sort of like taking whatever workflows they get thrown at you as the gold standard, because everyone is still figuring it out. There's no gold standard. So I think it's important to make up your own mind about how we should work for your team size, for the application, for everything. And I think with Pi, Pi, I think there's other ones as well. It's not the only one, but you don't have to fight the framework to do what you want, which is like you don't have to find the weird intersection of whatever APIs to make it do. Like it just writes whatever you need to. I think it's good philosophy. That's why I like it.
Yeah, I like that. It makes sense that I feel like Vim or Emacs users will probably naturally gravitate to those kinds of things because they're customizable. It's like the same kind of group of people. I feel like we would. But so that's why I like. I mean,
Yeah,
I hadn't seen it before. I know a friend of mine who uses Pi, but I haven't actually talked to him about it at all. So I just knew of its existence, but I didn't realize it was this. So yeah, no, really, really cool. I want to explore it.
cool.
And I appreciate you being willing to share so much with us. I hope others in the community also benefit from this, but I definitely did. And yeah, thanks for
Thank you.
pairing. Thanks for being willing to show me around.
It was really fun. Thank you. Appreciate it.